Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's truly wonderful to see so many familiar faces here today. As I look around this room, even without our international users, I'm reminded by the impact that our software has on so many different industries. From banking to health insurance, from government to public transport, all companies, all industries use DATPROF software to enhance the software quality. And we understand that test data plays a critical role in the reliability, the security, but also the functionality of the software that shapes our world. And in this rapidly evolving landscape, our mission has never been more essential. We are committed to provide you with the tools and the solutions to solve these test data bottlenecks. During this session, we will take a look back at some of the features that we have released last year. However, we are also very excited to share our future plans and some of the things that we have been working on for the last couple of months. But first, our road trip to the US. As Martin has mentioned this morning, a couple of weeks ago we had the opportunity to visit our office in Miami. And I must say it was quite an adventure. So during our visit, we brainstormed with some partners about expanding our business in the United States. We had some great meetings with clients and talked about test data problems. Of course, we also explored the vibrant city of Miami and Miami Vice, and Miami Beach. Miami Vice, yeah. But yeah, that was not the highlight of our trip. The highlight of our trip was in Orlando. And no, we didn't went to Disney World. It was the Star East conference in Orlando. And to give you a little bit of the perspective of the scale of the United States, this is the Netherlands on a true scale. So the distance between Miami and Orlando is about a drive from 4 hours. It's the same distance from Lauwersoog to Maastricht. So we rented a car. And we went from Miami to Orlando. And the first 2 hours of the drive were quite eventful. We were driving through an interconnected maze of cities. So imagine this, you would be driving from Groningen to Amsterdam, only within an urban area. The next 2 hours were completely different. So we had just plain wasteland. So expect the same, imagine the same trip from Groningen to Amsterdam, without any city or villages or whatsoever. And this is just the half of Florida. However, the trip was great and it was totally worth it. We had some great talks with industry specialists, with testers, with automation specialists, with engineers to talk about their struggles around test data. And it became evident that test data still is one of the biggest challenges that has to be solved in test data management and modern software development. And the numerous conversations we had with the industry professionals, all struggling with test data management, reaffirmed the significance of our work. And it further solidified our beliefs that we're on the right path. And what was really curious was that of the 40 exhibitors, only 2 focused on test data management. The rest of the exhibitors were all in test data automation. So, from our road trip to our roadmap, what were the things that we've developed last year? I want to highlight 2 of them. The first that we've developed and released last year was the introduction of workflow. So, why did we develop workflow? Well, one of the reasons is that we wanted to make it easier to automate complex test data tasks, not to just automate a subset project or to automate a masking project, or if you want to combine those different applications together, you can do that directly now from runtime and not using the runtime API. Of course, you still can use the runtime API, but you don't have to. You can model that workflow directly in runtime. So what is workflow? Well, workflow is an easy-to-use drag-and-drop designer directly built in DATPROF runtime. You can easily connect a masking project, a subsetting project, a generation project together and to fully automate the provisioning of the test data. You can also build some complex flows. So for example, you can run a custom SQL script that extracts some data from the database, for example, data model version, And dependent on the data model version, it can directly execute a specific application. You can also send emails, for example, with audit logs. And the best part of it, workflow can be fully automated also using the runtime API. We also support the use of output properties. So each module in workflow has some input properties and some output properties. So for example, if you would start a masking run, the output of that masking run will be an audit report. And that audit report can be used in a send email module as an attachment. All right, Yoeri, you can give a live demonstration about workflow.
Yeah. Hi everyone. This is my first year here, so I think a short introduction would be in order. If you've submitted a support ticket in the last 12 months, odds are we've already met. As a matter of fact, for me today was more of a matching faces to email signatures than anything else, or people that I've seen in meetings. And breaking with traditions for me, normally I spend my days working on our support processes, making sure that our customers are able to do their work without any hassle and to innovate effectively. Today I'll be going through a relatively short demonstration of runtime workflow, which is our very own drag and drop automation tool, as Bert has alluded to. So some of you who were here last year may have already seen workflow in its previous version as it was back then. But in the meantime, we've been hard at work at making more innovations, adding more features, making workflow more dependable, reliable, and more efficient. Also, Bert alluded to automation becoming more and more the name of the game as far as IT is concerned, and we think workflow is a very good addition to this. So, in order to get the most out of this demo, I think it would be good to take a look at our functional overview of what we're going to be showing in this demo, so what we want to achieve. So let's imagine that we're all working in the same company. Let's imagine we're all testers working on the same database. We have a certain database infrastructure that we want to mask and subset. And for this, I have a short diagram that I'll be looking at together. So you can see here on the top left corner that we have Gasware. Let's imagine this is our production database. Inside of this database, which looks like a fairly typical CRM application, we have information on customers, both civilians and military customers. In order to test with this information, we need to create a copy of this test environment, which we then call Gasware TDM. Gasware TDM has the same data as our production environment, and we'll be copying that over using a subset without reducing the data volume. Now that we have an environment, we still need to make sure that we mask this information that's in the database and to generate synthetic data so that we can add extra use cases to test against. After this, we have something which I would like to call Gasware TDM Plus, which is our TDM database, but also masked and enriched with synthetic data. Once we have this larger data set, because we have multiple teams that need to test against this data, we want to make sure that every team has their own test database available to test against. And in order to achieve this, we'll be using subsetting dynamically and making sure that we design a system where the testing users are able to determine which data sets they would like to test against. So that's enough for the process diagram itself. Let's switch over to workflow and we'll walk through it together by the hand of my runtime demo. Bit of a switch over. All right. You should be able to see workflow now. Let's sign in. All right, let's go over to workflow. So what we see here is a very complex workflow that I've designed, which achieves all of the points that we've talked about earlier. If we click edit here, we go into the graphical interface. And you can see that this is a very simple system where you can select modules from the left side and drag and drop them into the interface to do a number of different tasks. For instance, I just dragged this PowerShell module in here. So let's remove this and just start at the very start. So any workflow is started at the start node or the start module. This module doesn't do anything aside from send a signal from it when you press the execution step on a workflow and sends a signal downflow to whichever module is attached to it. The very first module that we have attached here is the start scenario module. This is a module which takes a predefined environment, an application, and a scenario for that application, and executes it automatically. If we go take a look at our environments, you can see that, for instance, this gasware master TDM, which is using the gasware refresh for Postgres, that this is represented in runtime as an active environment. So for every environment that you would like to use in workflow, it's important to make sure that they're also implemented in your runtime in general. Let me open it up again. So once this refresh, which is basically a full copy of the original dataset to our TDM database, is completed, we want to make sure that we mask any sensitive data. Because we've connected this start scenario to the next start scenario, the masking scenario, this is automatically started when the refreshing of the dataset is completed. Once this completes, it's important to take a moment to reflect and see how the deployment is going so far. So we've got a new module here which is called the result switch. What this does is it's an intelligent logic gate which looks at the preceding module and takes a look at whether it succeeded or whether it's failed with various errors. And this is applicable for all modules. Here, in case this module were to fail, the masking module, a signal will be sent from the onError node. And this, in this case, wouldn't do anything and the workflow would end. This is important because if we hadn't put this logic gate in here, the run would continue and we would potentially be distributing unmasked data to the eventual subset of databases, which is undesirable. If we succeed, however, two things happen simultaneously. First, we make sure that the contents of what we've masked are correct using an execute SQL module. This module connects to any environment that you've got predefined in runtime, which is a database connection, and allows you to execute any SQL statement. In this case, the masking we've done is primarily crossing out the names of military members, as their information is more privacy sensitive and we want to make sure that their information does not become public. And we've done this by writing a simple case statement in which we check the last names, see if they are crossed out, and if this is the case, then we output masked as a result. And if not, we output not masked to indicate that something is wrong. As Bert said earlier, the output of every single module is saved as an output property. So if we check the output here, we can see that for the execute SQL module, the result of a query that you execute is always saved as a result property. And we'll be referring back to this later. Another item that we'll be executing simultaneously is making sure that we send information about the run to whoever is responsible for it. In this case, maybe a data officer or someone in management responsible for making sure that the quality of an executed run was good. The send email module just connects to an SMTP connection, a server, and allows you to supply a recipient, a subject, any attachments from previous modules, and a body. And these attachments are automatically generated by the start scenario blocks and also the SQL block. But because that is in parallel, we wouldn't be seeing those. At any rate, all of the modules, all of the output that you're expecting to see when you execute, for instance, a privacy run or a subset run, are all automatically saved as output properties. And they all have their own default names. Because copying these over manually can be quite difficult, we also have a built-in browser which you can use to, for instance, open the browser, and we can take a look at the latest privacy run, and we can, for instance, attach the audit report or the run ID or the name of the scenario. And this allows you to build up as much information about earlier runs as you could want. In this case, we're just attaching the audit report to the email as that contains the most management-like information about a run. All right, after this is done, we'll be generating the synthetic data that we're using in our eventual database. Again, this generates output properties which we could use later. Once this is done, we actually refer back to the SQL module that we've executed earlier through an if condition. An if condition, I don't think I need to explain in much detail. It checks value 1 against value 2, and if they are equal or unequal, the resulting node on which it outputs changes. So in this case, we check the result property, which if we refer back, if the run succeeds, is going to be masked. And it checks if it equals masked, which it should. We should pass on by the true node. If not, then probably something has gone wrong in the masking. We're fairly sure that our data is not anonymized correctly, and we should pass through the false node, letting a tester or someone in management know that the run has failed, we need to restart or modify existing data. After this is done, we've basically reached the point where we have Gasware TDM Plus, a masked TDM database with synthetic data. And because we generate extra data and we take the entire data from a database, it would be interesting to see how large this database is in logical size, so we can determine later how much the subsetting has helped reduce this total size. We do this again with a SQL module, which uses a standard Postgres function to output the amount of megabytes the database uses, because this is quite a small demo database. After this, we reach to the point where we're going to be using output variables to, or not output variables actually, we use a PowerShell module to import CSV files which contain customer IDs which the subsetters can supply themselves. So what happens is, if a tester wants to determine a test case that they want to test against, they can look in the original database or request information, and someone can compile a short list of customer IDs or perhaps a longer list, and they can put this into a CSV file, upload that to the data folder in runtime, and after this, the PowerShell module will actually grab it, insert it into a temporary table in the database, so that subset can then refer back to that as a start filter. Assuming this succeeds, we have another result switch. We pass on to the eventual subsetting process. We have 3 separate subset databases that we want to create. So we start 3 scenarios in parallel to make sure that we don't have to wait for successive runs. After this, we generate the resulting size of the databases in megabytes, so we know what the reduction is. Then, as you might remember from the quiz, we have to put a wait for all module to make sure that these things don't start running asynchronously. And then we send a short overview mail of what we've done. And this uses quite a few variables, such as what is the environment's name, the status in which it ended, and the proportional size from the SQL modules. So let's execute this workflow, and you can see it going, and while this is going, we can refer to the various environments. So we can see it started now. It's now busy refreshing the test database. So now Gasware TDM is being created and filled. And we can also see, if we refer to the environment, that this application is being executed. We can see the live logs. It's just finishing. Referring back to our workflow. We can see that it gives you feedback the moment it does finish. And now we're going to be busy masking this Gasware TDM database. This shouldn't take too long. They're all fairly small databases, so let's just hold tight. Again, if we look at the environments, we can see what's going on. So this run is finished now as well. Masking was okay, which is a relief. So the TDM database has been masked correctly, and now we're generating around 1,500 extra customers into our TDM database. And again, let's just take a look at how this is progressing. Looks like it's already finished. We calculate the original size, the PowerShell module is executed, the result switch is triggered, and now if we go over to our development environments, we can see that we're running all 3 subsets simultaneously, which should be done in a second. Again, logging is printed live, so you can refer back to this. All right, now that's finishing up. And if we're quick, we can still see it finish. I think we're slightly too late. But we can look at the history. So we can see that after a run is successfully completed, or with errors, we can see the history of a run, what happened. We can see logging of the various modules, so we can inspect in case something went wrong. And we should now also have a few emails containing information. All going well. So this is the first email that we automatically generated. It says, well, let's look at the audit report here real quick. It's an HTML file, and in this you can see that we anonymized the customers table and also the customers history table. And of course, this is a useful feature in case you'd like to refer back and see if the quality is okay. For instance, in this one, if you, the astute among you will notice that one of our functions didn't actually manage to find hits for all of the rows in the value lookup, so that might be something you might want to adjust. After this, at the very end of the process, we received another email which contains more information, such as which environments did we run. It looks like they all finished with the status done, which is good. We can see which versions of the templates are being used. And eventually we can also see that all three databases roughly result in a size reduction of 66%. So if we go over to the databases, we can see that because this template is defined with subset, if we go, for instance, to the T3 database, which is one of the subset of databases, we have customer IDs starting with 1,000, and these are all fake synthetic customers that we've generated. And we can also see that the customers that are generated here are database-wide, so all of the relations are still intact. So if you look at customer ID number 1001, Jinzel, we could also see that if we go to the contracts, you can see that this customer is represented in the contracts. And if we look at this contract is also represented in the contract details. And so you see you've created a consistent database, and not just one of them, we've created 3 small subsets. And that's about what I had to show you.
All right. Well, that was a great demo of workflow. We did a lot more last year. So one of the following big items that we've released last year was the introduction of a new permission model inside DATPROF Runtime. And as some of you might know, previous versions of DATPROF Runtime uses a very simplistic model in which you had administrators that can practically do everything. And you also had self-service users that were limited to the dashboard and could start a certain run for a specific environment. With the 4.4 release of Runtime, we've introduced a new permission model with some great features. So, of course, we already had users, but we also introduced users groups in which you can group users together. But more important, you can also synchronize those use groups directly from your Active Directory or other LDAP provider. So you can manage your users in your Active Directory, and you can synchronize that with Runtime, and then you have the same user groups as you have in your Active Directory, and now you have them as well in Runtime. We also introduced the concept of roles, and roles are a set of permissions. So a lot of checkboxes, and you can really specify for a certain role what a user can do when he is logged into Runtime. Permissions are the combination of those. So for example, a user or a user group assigned to a specific role, to a specific context. Runtime has more contexts than just one. So let me give you an example of Runtime, a typical installation with some environments and some groups. So here you can see a Runtime installation, and we have 2 groups, a master TDM group with 1 environment, a Gasware master TDM environment, and we've got a development group with 3 test databases, test environments. We also have some workflows. So with the new permission model, you can assign, for example, the user John Doe in a specific role, so as an admin, for example, to the global context of runtime. And this means that this John Doe can practically do everything inside runtime. He can manage all the environments, all the groups, all the workflows, dependent on the checkboxes of the role admin. You can also assign, for example, Eva Johnson, also in the role as admin, to a specific environment. She can do everything like John, but only within the context of that environment. Not on the group above, not on other groups or other environments, also not on the workflows that are present. So you can assign users or user groups on different levels. Another example, assign the user group testers, and every individual that is inside that user group, assign that to the group as the role user. And user is limited. Users can only start the run. They cannot change, for example, the database settings. They cannot upload new templates. So they're limited in their power, in their grants. But they are part of the testers group, and they can be assigned on a group level, which means that they can do everything of every environment within that group. Workflows are separate, so you can assign, for example, Eric Smith as a role in manager to a specific workflow. You can also assign them on a global level, which means they have access to all of the workflows. We did a lot more last year, but that's maybe for another time, or you have seen it probably already in the release notes. So I want to start about what's next, so what's coming up. You might already have seen it on our website or our social media channels, but one of the big projects that we have been working on for the last couple of months already is the introduction of database virtualization. So what is database virtualization? With database virtualization, you have cloning and containerization technology, which enables you to virtualize your test data. So you can easily snapshot your test data. So for example, as a tester, you start at the morning, you make a snapshot of your test data, you run some tests which will break probably the test data, and then you have to go back to your initial situation. Typically what you will do in that particular time window is go back to your DBA, restore the database, a long time will pass by. With database virtualization, you just log into runtime, you press restore, and within seconds you have your original database back in the same order. So you can easily snapshot and restore your test data. You can create multiple versions of your test data. But even more important, you can even clone your test database and give it to fellow testers and developers. So cloning and snapshotting is practically instantly. It's really fast by using the virtualization technology and also the cleaning technology and the containerization technology. The best part about snapshot and cloning is that it doesn't take extra storage. So even if you create 100 snapshots of your database, it doesn't claim extra storage. Only the changed data will be saved. So there is a virtualization layer on top of the file system that will keep track of the changes inside the blocks, and it will only save the changed blocks. So this is really great technology. Unfortunately, it's not ready to demonstrate yet today, but hopefully soon we will create a webinar, invite you all to give a demonstration about this new technology that's coming. So that's the first big announcement for this year. We've made some great progress in the last couple of weeks already. The second milestone that we are currently working on is support for DB2 ZOS, also known as DB2 for mainframe. Especially in the financial institutes, mainframe is still a big database. And for those who know us a little bit longer, you know that we already support DB2, but that's DB2 on iSeries and also DB2 for Linux, Unix, Windows. Those DB2 editions are completely different. I've been talking to IBM for I think the last couple of 5-6 years, and I always ask them, can we support mainframe? Can we get a mainframe? And they always said to me, well, Bert, bring us 1 million and a big data center and we can give you a mainframe. Well, I was not interested in the mainframe because you have lots of people that know how mainframes work, and we were only interested in the database part. Fortunately, IBM has now IBM Cloud, in which we can get virtualized mainframes directly from IBM Cloud. So we can connect to them. We already start working on it. I think it's around 90%. So hopefully we are able to start testing with this privacy version in a couple of weeks at the system of clients. The third milestone that we will be working on, we didn't start it yet, only in an R&D phase, is our first NoSQL database. So one of the biggest NoSQL databases out there, MongoDB, we will be starting in creating an option to mask it consistently with your relational databases, and hopefully more NoSQL databases will come after that as well. Of course, we also committed to improving workflow with extra modules, with improving generation, with masking functionality, and subset as well. So, we are really excited about our roadmap for this year. We know that there are more challenges that lies ahead, so we're not done yet. For today, I want to express my gratitude to each and every one of you for being part of this incredible journey and this incredible day. I really hope today has been both enjoyable and enlightening, and that you bring back some of the knowledge back to your own organizations.